The first question is, I think it's kind of a general one. This might be for Jessica, is why do you think this narrative about immigrants not reporting crimes has persisted? Is it politically useful to advocacy groups, that kind of thing? In other words, the data shows that there just isn't that much difference. And like Steve said, on some crimes, immigrants seem more likely to report crime. So why is this storyline persisting despite the fact that it does not actually seem to be true?
I think it's for the reason that you suggested, Mark. I think it's because it was a politically useful narrative to be promoted, but one that is actually counterproductive and may have actually been creating fear among immigrants about reporting crimes. This is something that comes up in almost every single discussion about sanctuary policies, that this is something that is necessary because immigrants fear police and we need to encourage immigrants to report crimes. And it simply has never been supported by very good evidence. In fact, all the evidence available before, all the attempts to develop evidence, academic research, experience of local law enforcement agencies, the DOJ data itself, all suggested that immigrants report crimes just as much as everyone else. But that didn't stop people from pushing this narrative because it was politically useful as a justification for sanctuary policies. And of course, we would want to have immigrants reporting crime. We wouldn't want them to feel that they don't have access to services. But I guess it sounded too good to check or something.
Yeah, and just as a FYI, the paper, which is online at our website, cis.org, does actually go over some of those previous studies and links to them and, addresses the shortcomings in the other research that's been done on this.
Mark, could I just say one thing quick?
Yeah.
The thing is to keep in mind, this is really the first nationally representative sample in which we have a big enough population of immigrants to actually evaluate. So part of the reason people could make this argument is it was always indirect and inference, and that's the way people tried to get at it. Unrepresentative samples or one community or the opinion of community leaders. But now we have a direct sample of immigrant victims that's good, large, and robust. And so that's what makes this study so unique. And I think it tends to show what many suspected, but others had not, that immigrants really do report crimes at least as likely and sometimes more.
Is another question here, maybe, Jessica, you have something to say about it, and maybe Captain Harmon has some experience with it, and that's about these various visas. Captain Harmon was referring to U visas, which are for immigrants who've been victimized and cooperate with law enforcement, and the law enforcement agency has to certify that they were important in the case. And there's some other there's other programs like this in the immigration law that incentivize immigrants to actually come forward and cooperate. Do you think, Jessica and Captain Harmon, do you have any experience with this where the awareness of these programs actually sort of word spreads and encourages immigrants to actually report crimes? And I would put this, this is my own spin on the question, both in a good way and a bad way. In other words, does it encourage immigrants to report crimes, but does it also yet another way of gaming the immigration system for people who, maybe otherwise wouldn't have gone this way? Jessica?
Well, actually, I was going to suggest we start with Captain Harmon. Since he's got
on the U visas, any thoughts on that? Does it work in encouraging people to come forward and report criminality? Victimization?
It appears so. There's a process they have to go through to get those U visas. One of them has to be basically signed by the sheriff's office, validating some of the concerns that they're needed. Some of them could be for domestic violence, where there was a line of domestic violence reports or reports that were taken over time. They also have to go through the state attorney's office. So they're vetted by several people before they're approved through USCIS and everything, they're vetted. So it depends. I mean, I don't know how every area does it. I know for us, it would probably be difficult for them to try to game the system to get a U visa due to the amount of research we do in reference to their claims and working with the women's shelter with some of their claims with the relationship we have with them. We have had instances where there was one that was for a murder, and the guy came forward with information, and we went through the process to get everything validated. And he ended up getting a visa to allow him to stay here, as he was a main witness in the crime based on the information he provided, which was verified. But there's a whole process that they have to go through in order to get validated and approved for those visas.
I would say that's the way the U visa program was designed to work, to help victims of certain very serious crimes assist law enforcement agencies in bringing the offenders to justice. It was not meant to be, just an entitlement of legal status for anyone who happens to be a victim of a crime or claims to be. And that's where I think that the U visa program has run off the rails a little bit in some places, where it is viewed as an entitlement and something that law enforcement agencies should routinely certify without doing the kind of careful due diligence that's required under the program rules that is being done in Collier County. I do talk to law enforcement agencies who tell me that they get victims coming forward who claim to be, have had something happen to them that they can't verify, that, maybe wasn't even a crime, that happened in some other jurisdiction, happened a long time ago. We do see these attempts to game the system, and unfortunately, they're clogging up the system because the number of U visas is limited. So they're kind of getting in the way of the cases where it's really important to be able to offer that domestic violence gang cases. It can be very useful to help people come forward to testify. So I do think there's some serious reforms that need to be made in the U visas, and one of them would be for law enforcement agencies to be following the intent and rules of the program to make sure that it doesn't become something that just pops up when somebody is identified for deportation.
And here's a question for Steve. You kind of addressed it, but maybe you could sort of reiterate it. The question is, does the data that you looked at really speak to the specific concern that it's the unauthorized population that are reluctant to report crime, not those who are foreigners but are here legally? And so it's the issue. In other words, are illegal immigrants specifically or especially going to be reluctant to report crime to avoid coming to the attention of federal authorities? And what is the data that we're looking at tell us about that issue?
Right. So we have a lot of information on the likely population of illegal immigrants in other Census Bureau collected surveys. Again, this is done for the Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Statistics, but it's done by the Census Bureau. The data is weighted to reflect the whole U.S. population, 12 years of age of over, not in institutions. So we know from the analysis of the American...
Steve, just to clarify, the survey, the National Crime Victimization Survey, does not ask whether you have legal status or not. And so that's why the stuff you're talking about is relevant.
Right. So it's well studied in the American Community Survey and the current population survey. Do illegal immigrants respond? The answer is yes. And they can be identified. And when you do that kind of identification based on all the other information, like when did they come to the United States, age, educational attainment, country of origin, and so forth, it looks like about 2/3 of all non-citizen Hispanics are in the country illegally or live with an illegal immigrant. So when we look at this population of likely illegal immigrants or people who live with illegal immigrants, we don't find that they report crime at low rates, and so often they report crimes at higher rates than the native born. So the best we can tell, looking at the population that most closely matches, based on a pretty significant body of research, that illegal immigrants are not reporting crime, even illegal immigrant women. Having said that, we don't attempt to definitively identify illegal immigrants in this survey, and we don't We don't, we don't know of any research that has done that. But prior research indicates, and we're pretty certain of that fact, that what share of non-citizen Hispanics not in institutions, age 12 and over, the target population here, are in the country illegally. And when we look at that population, we just don't see, I'll just give you one statistic, right? We find that 53% of U.S.-born people report serious crime, and non-citizen Hispanic victims reported at 57%. So again, we just don't find the evidence that they're reporting crimes at low rates. The population that would seem to be the population people often have the biggest concern for, illegal immigrants.
And the report, again, online at cis.org, the whole report is there. It's 30 plus pages long with multiple tables where a lot of these issues are specifically broken out. In other words, non-citizen Hispanics, which, as Steve said, is kind of it's not a perfect proxy, but it's a pretty good proxy for illegal immigrants or people living in households with illegal immigrants. It's broken out in some detail. Obviously, we don't want to go into it. We already showed several bar graphs, which is probably several too many bar graphs for a online presentation like this, but it's all there in detail in the report online. Here's a question that probably Jessica may have some thoughts on, but I want to see what Captain Harmon has to say about it first. If the issue with these 287G programs, which is cooperation between local authorities and federal immigration authorities, if that is, that's, the data shows that's not dissuading people from from reporting crimes. But let's just say, theoretically, if it were, what is the advantage of cooperating with local authorities? In other words, the question, the way we got it phrased was, does it really matter if police don't turn criminals over to ICE? Can't ICE just find them on their own? So what are the benefits that Collier County sees in doing this kind of cooperation with ICE?
Well, some of it is, I'll take our jail population, for example. So our jail population, when we started, prior to this program, we did a survey of our MA population at the jail. And I believe it was 24% of the jail population self-admitted to us that they were illegally here. Since we started this program, our jail population went from about 1,100 inmates. This morning, I think we're at, let me see, I can tell you where we're at for our jail population. I think it was just over 600, or 696 is our jail population this morning. Well, in 2007, it was over 1,000. So that's one thing that helps with the jail population going down, and the cost to taxpayers for people that are incarcerated is one aspect of it. The other one, where you're talking about why can't ICE just find them? ICE is not as well. Law enforcement across the board in some areas is not staffed well, and ICE, if you know how long the border is, dealing with the border between ICE and Border Patrol as well as the interior, there's a lot they have to deal with. The 287G program is somewhat of a force multiplier for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and that's kind of what we work side by side with ICE. We have a program manager out of Miami that oversees our program, and we have an office in the county north of us, which is the regional office for immigration that cover the local jails in this area. So it is a force multiplier, and it is a good relationship for local law enforcement and immigration to have. Now, me being in the state of Florida, there has been some executive orders signed in by the governor requiring us to cooperate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement and federal authorities in some cases.
So before Jessica, she may have some thoughts on this, but I was actually wondering, you made clear, obviously, and this is the case everywhere, sheriff's deputies are not going around asking people for their green cards based on what they look or anything like that. So the people that you end up basically putting into the 287G program are people you've arrested for other crimes. What are some of the, I don't know, the top 2 or 3 or 4 kinds of crimes that your deputies arrest people for who then end up being found to be, for some reason, involved with the immigration system?
It's crimes across the board. I mean, I can't get into specific numbers in reference to some of our stats from our 287G program, because some of the information obtained from federal databases. So if anyone wants specific numbers for our program, they have to do a FOIA through the federal government. I can tell you from our records, on average, people that we place detainers on average, have 4 misdemeanors and 2 felonies, either current or previous. Basically, the whole criminal history involved throughout the United States, wherever they're arrested, we do a criminal history check on everybody that's arrested. And from the data we've had, basically it's 4 misdemeanors and 2 felonies on average. But the crimes they're arrested for across the board. It could be, I mean, yes, some are arrested for no valid DL. Some are arrested for open container. Some are arrested for murder. Some are arrested for sex bat. It's across the board. So, I mean, that's pretty much all I can say in reference to the crimes. It's from open container all the way up to murder.
Okay. Jessica, do you have any thoughts on that? In other words, why can't ICE just go and find them on their own? What's the problem?
The thing is again, as I said before, ICE's priority is overwhelmingly going after that small fraction of the immigrant population that are committing and being arrested for state and local crimes. So ICE doesn't patrol the streets looking for criminals. They depend on local law enforcement agencies to let them know who is in their jails, who they can use programs like secure communities to identify a lot of them. But, you know, with a high number of gotaways and the high criminality in this population of people who were never encountered by the Border Patrol, who slipped past them, you know, those people aren't going to show up through secure communities. They will in a 287G program, but ICE can't have a presence in every courthouse, you know, finding out when people are convicted. They depend, the most efficient way to do it and the safest way, frankly, to do it is for information sharing for state, you know, for a jail like Collier County to tell ICE, okay, so-and-so is being released on his local charges today. We have a detainer from you. You determined that he was removable. Now's the time to come and get him. And that's how it usually works. Because ICE, it's not safe for one reason to have ICE officers patrolling the streets, knocking on doors in neighborhoods, trying to find these criminals that they want to deport. So that cooperation is really essential. And ICE often has information about criminal aliens that the locals don't have. So that's why this information sharing is critical.
There's a question came in, and it's kind of, I'm not really sure what I think about it, but I think it's worth bringing up. Somebody asked, if there is no chilling effect, then what other justifications can be offered for sanctuary cities? So in a sense, sort of put yourself maybe in the head of these advocacy groups. Is there really any other justification for sanctuary policies other than this apparently mythical chilling effect?
Well, I think that the real purpose of sanctuary policies is to thwart enforcement of immigration laws in the interior and to make it as hard as possible for ICE to do its job, because those who advocate for them don't agree with our immigration laws and think that it should be, impossible to enforce them. They'd rather do away with them. And since Congress has not done that, instead they've embarked on trying to implement obstacles for ICE, especially at the state and local level, despite the implications for public safety. It's hard. I can't think of a rational justification for a sanctuary policy. Things happen. We know, so many cases of immigrants who have reported crimes who, were subjected to more crimes by those offenders when that offender was released because of sanctuary policies, when they could have been deported had the local law enforcement agency cooperated with ICE.
And this is a question that that Captain Harmon already kind of addressed, but let's just finish with this one. Some people critiquing 287G programs point to the cost, that it actually, it takes resources, some manpower, what have you, to do this cooperative agreement with the federal government. Is it worth it? In other words, is your experience that it does use resources, and all resources are limited, and is that use of resources worth it, and does it balance out by benefits, whether monetary benefits, which you suggested, the fewer people in the jails, but also public safety benefits?
So yes, yeah, I could say it's beneficial. From my perspective is you can't really put a price tag on a victim, whether it be someone who gets murdered. I'm not putting a price tag on somebody's life. Does it take resources? Yes, it takes resources. We've put things into. We put things into the process for our staff to work with this and 287G, because it does take resources. Now we do have an IGSA, which is Intergovernmental Service Agreement with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which allows us to house ICE detainees and transport them to local detention facilities, where we do receive some reimbursement for our resources. But even though it does take resources, I can't put a cost on someone's life or the victims of crimes.
Right. Thank you. I think we're going to respect people's time and end it here. The report, again, is online at cis.org. It should be right there on the homepage about whether immigrants report crime more or less than the native born. And I want to thank all of our participants, Jessica Vaughan and Steve Camarota. Their work is all online at our website, again, at cis.org. And I want to thank Captain Harmon. For those of you more interested in the issue, we've published a good deal on this topic of immigration enforcement and criminal justice, local law enforcement at our website at cis.org. And also, for those of you just interested generally in the topic, we have a weekly podcast as well that you can subscribe to. It's called Parsing Immigration Policy. It's at all the usual podcast places. And this presentation itself will be on our website within a day or two if you want to rewatch it or if you missed something. So I appreciate your joining us, and I hope you'll join us for our next event. Thank you.